Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. Well, in continuation of this series of the roots of HOCD, tonight I want to talk to you on a different level again. And I want you to stay with me. Try to understand what I'm trying to say. And this is not just important for you about HOCD or OCD or pedophile OCD or responsible OCD or any subsets of OCD. This is important for your life, to understand yourself and your psyche better. How is it put together? What is it that is trying to control us? And just don't think because you're looking in the mirror and you see you and it's a familiar, trustable face. There are elements that have been used in putting us together, namely the brain, which makes thoughts, that they could work against you if you don't understand the nature of their existence and what they do, how they work. So I want you to pay full attention to what we are going to experience together and discuss. Look, what is the most important instinct in your life? Think about it. The most important instinct in your life is survival, isn't it? Everything you do could not be realized if you don't survive. You have to survive. And everything you do it because of survival. Some directly, and some having had the basics of survival taken care of, you add to it, but it's all connected to survival. And the survival in different people comes in different cases. In part of it, we all share the same thing, to stay alive. Everybody has that, which is the most important one. Then it's who you are, how you're put together, what you're all about. Yeah? Which includes the stuff that makes you to be whole. Your family, your children, your faculties, your gender, your sexual orientation. Human being is programmed to have a place or to know what his or her place in this world is. What is his role? And that is known and apparent to them from when they're born, pretty much. And they operate on a certain program that has been put into them in the wombs of their mother. And that's how they identify themselves. In most cases, if not all cases, we identify ourselves in sexual ways as your gender, how you know yourself, and you interact with the world indirectly and directly sexually. Everything comes back to sex and survival because that's how the whole population continues and Earth survives, by procreation and all the rest of it. So that is one of the most important parts of your survival, your sexuality. So if we now easily connect the two together, that your survival, your persona, your survival is the most important, powerful instinct in your life. And when you have something that you desire so much and you value so much, like your life, what is the enemy to that? The fear of losing it, the fear of not having that health, that life, that survival opportunities and protection. That's the fear of it. And because the instinct of survival is the strongest instinct in you, the fear of losing it is the strongest fear that you could ever know. So when you really value something, you will be faced with the strongest fear you've ever noticed, to the point that fear gets into the gear trying to protect what what you consider most important to you, which is your survival, your sexuality, your gender, and the fear of losing it and not being that, since you really love who you are, becomes tremendously strong. Because strong survival and desire for what you really love brings about the strongest fear of not having it, losing it, or something goes wrong with it. It extends to anything in our life. Forget yourself, look at a certain bicycle you buy, or a car that is your favorite prize car, or a horse that you have, or something that is so special to you. You're always fearful if something happens to it. Now, coming back to what we were talking about. So on that note, the fear goes into full gear to protect what it is that is most valuable to you. And it goes to tangents that, and hypotheses, and the things that could ever possibly threaten what you most value. Your gender, your sexuality. In this case, we're talking about one particular gender, heterosexuals, who are hit these days often due to all kind of information out there that enters in their brain, and the brain makes thoughts and intrusive thoughts that everybody in the world has it, gets onto it, and then creates havoc. So the attack on the heterosexuals by their brain due to the fear, which is because they really love who they are and want to be who they are. Whatever your gender is, you love who you are, you want to be who you are, remain and stay, and that's so important for you that you are constantly concerned, what if I don't have this? What if something goes wrong? Just like you think about, what if my mother dies? What if my father dies? What if my child dies? These are things that are always in our heads, and they bring about that concern, and with it, the strongest fear, emotion of fear. So you going through this all your life, if you have OCD especially, that it multiplies in power, and you're constantly concerned as a heterosexual, if I truly am heterosexual, if threats will come, because I hear all kinds of things in my life, and I see introduced in the movies and in news and in the people's personal lives being out in the exposure and talked about on TV and everything. All that information gives possibility of opportunities of what other lifestyles are out there. And if you certainly don't want to have anything to do with what is out there, and you're so happy with the way you are, you start being fearful about, what if something goes wrong with what I love to be and how I have always been? And that tangent becomes as powerful as your interest and love for your persona, who you are, how you're put together. And therefore it goes to the tangents that is unbelievable, and it starts calculating all the possibilities. And then, since you're constantly preparing to defend out of fear and protect what you love most, your gender, your sexuality, in your case, your heterosexuality, you're constantly being focused on that and calculating things and wondering and questioning and trying to make sure. You want assurances, especially if you have OCD, you want assurances, all this, because that is the disease of doubting mind. So you doubt everything. You doubt if I have to turn the light on 5 times, so you doubt everything else. What if something goes wrong? What if I have to do this in order to keep this as it is and I love it to be? So you do many things, many crazy things. And in this case of HOCD, you start constantly trying to make sure. And for that, you constantly check, which comes from the fear of something goes wrong, which nothing ever will go wrong, but that's how the brain works. And you constantly become more and more fearful and calculating and focusing on it. And when you do all these things, what are you doing? You're creating synaptic neurons to focus on such topic. And when you're training yourself, rewiring yourself by this constant focus out of fear to making sure that you will be as good a heterosexual that you always been and you always wanted to be and will remain this way because you love yourself so much, you love your life and all that, that fear And that love for that creates the strongest fear. And since you're constantly dealing with this, you're creating that neuroplasticity of constantly being focused on this full force, which creates a constant loop of things that are unwanted and unwelcomed in your mind, and is going to eventually make you think, since you're constantly thinking about it, and these pictures and these thoughts get a chance to become stronger because you're constantly thinking about it. Whatever you do, a lot of it, thinking about it, playing piano, whatever, you become better at it. So you become really good at thinking about this sort of nonsense, to the point that you start actually having that so much in your head that you believe the thought that is constantly floating. That is because of the negative mind, doubting mind, and the weak mind, and constant practice of thinking and focusing and fearful of this and concerned about this, which has occupied your mind, which in turn, after so long, you may actually believe the nonsense. Believe something that is biologically not possible. That a gender that has already been casted in the womb of the mother, casted in stone, can actually change, as if it's a cow's milk. After a while, it changes to sour milk, buttermilk, then maybe later to yogurt, and maybe later to cheese. That's not the way we are. It's a gender. It doesn't change. How it's made, how you're born, that's it, rest of your life. But the brain and thought is going to consider the impossibilities to the point of fear, to the point that you actually might fall victim to this constant conjuring up. Like there was a movie a long time ago, a very good movie called War Games. And I think it was Matthew Broderick. Is that I'm pronouncing his name? The one who actually played Ferris Bueller's. I think that was his first movie, one of the first movies. I really enjoyed that movie. I was much younger. And in that movie, The War Games, it was this about this government computer that had thought that there's an attack happening. And because it thought there's an attack happening, it had gone through all kinds of preparation and war games in order to prepare and defend. And because it was constantly into it, it started believing that actually there is an attack coming. And for that purpose, and as a retaliation, it actually started countdown for firing the nuclear weapons. That's how seriously the computer was entrenched with that whole idea and believed it to the point that it was actually thinking that is happening. This is what's going to happen if you constantly think something that is not happening in your mind, to the point that you actually might believe that you are homosexual when you're actually not. And because you're not, it will constantly bother you while you'll never act on it because you're not homosexual, but it will be looping in there and driving you crazy. You need to understand that there is a thought, there is a brain, and there is you. You cannot believe the thought coming out of this brain, because the brain makes thoughts 70, 80, 90,000 different thoughts a day. And based on what we talked about, the fear and the love of something that you have, the stronger the fear and the stronger the enemy attacks what you really love the most. But none of that means anything, because it will never happen. All these OCDs of pedophile OCD, responsibility OCD, harm OCD, HOCD, these are all intrusive thoughts that everybody in the world has it. And when they fall into the glitch of OCD, when caudate nucleus doesn't work well, then it loops and constantly makes them be occupied with that. But the pedophile OCD will never act on it. Harm OCD will never act on it. Other OCDs will never. HOCD, homosexual OCD, will never act on it. But these are what keeps rolling in their heads. And you gotta understand, that you do not need to be so fearful about something that is just conjured up by the brain and it's got no reality to it. Don't become like that computer in the war game movie and actually think that there is something there for you to actually get engaged into the actual action of war, which in that movie was the case. But in your case, to believe that you're actually what you're not, and you've never been, and you'll never be. Don't be fooled by thoughts. The roots of it is fear. And because you love what you are and you enjoy, and that is exactly the only thing you are, you've always been, you will always be. Fear is the roots of all OCDs. And you remember that. On that note, relax, enjoy your life, and recognize these thoughts and call them for what they are and continue your way without paying attention to them. So they will never get stronger, and you always focus on the fact that these are not true, irrelevant, and meaningless, and bogus. I'll talk to you soon.